Hello, everyone. Today I'm talking with Dr. Seyyed Hossein Nasr. He is very famous. There's no need to introduce him. But for those of you who don't know, Dr. Nasr is an eminent metaphysician, a profound scholar of Islamic metaphysics, art, and spirituality. He has written more than 40 books on these subjects and hundreds of articles. And he is currently the full professor of Islamic studies in George Washington University. And aside from being a very important theologian and metaphysician, Dr. Nasr is also an authority in the field of history of science. Doctor, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. It's an honor to have you.
It's a pleasure. It's the first time I'm giving an interview to New Zealand, so it's a new event.
Well, Doctor, the first question that I wanted to ask you is related to perennial philosophy, and that constitutes one of the main pillars of your thought. My question is that what is the relevance of perennial philosophy in the modern world, and why should one study traditional metaphysics rather than some other school of thought, such as existentialism or some other school of thought?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The simple answer is because metaphysics is true, most modern philosophy is false. But to expand on that, a perennial philosophy, precisely because it is perennial, has always been of significance, not only to understand the truth, but also how different civilizations in the different phases of their history have expressed and approached that truth. And it's actually a doctrine of the nature of reality that binds different traditional civilizations together. When we talk, people like myself, about tradition, we mean, in fact, a body of knowledge of originally revealed order, which has manifested itself in various traditional civilizations, religion itself, but also art, traditional science, ethics, and all different aspects of a civilization. And we believe that that is the norm, natural thing for human beings. And the modernism is a kind of anomaly, putting man in the center of reality rather than God, being homocentric rather than theocentric, and making man the measure of all things in the forgetfulness of the divine origin of the human state. And therefore, we believe that traditional philosophy, in these different expressions, of which one of the most powerful is Islamic, but also Hindu and otherwise, need to be as much known as possible, and I've devoted a lifetime to it myself.
Thank you, Doctor. And how does traditional metaphysics or like perennial philosophy differ from Aristotle's metaphysics or what is taught as metaphysics today in universities?
First of all, what is taught today at metaphysics universities is mostly post-Kantian understanding of metaphysics. I don't take that seriously, but anyway, even more traditional, it's taken as a branch of philosophy. In our Aristotelian philosophy, in a sense, metaphysics is, of course, the supreme science, the highest form of philosophy, as a branch of philosophy. Whereas in traditional civilizations, metaphysics, in a sense, is above discursive philosophy, is the highest science itself, al-hikmatul ula. In our own tradition, Islamic tradition, we use both the word falsafa and hikmah, hikmatul falsafa in Persian. And hikmat is a Quranic term, falsafa, of course, is a Greek term that enters into the Persian and Arabic languages, other Islamic languages. And as our own philosophical tradition developed, especially as we see in Mullah Sadra, he talks about his philosophy as hikmat al-muta'aliyah. And he used the universalized philosophy on the highest level to be that hikmah, and therefore to have metaphysics at the heart of it, rather than the purely Aristotelian, let's say, Avicennan understanding of metaphysics, which I mean the early Avicenna, which emulated Aristotelianism, I mean the later Avicenna, Avicennism, in which following Aristotle, metaphysics, in a sense, is a branch, although the most important branch of philosophy.
And as someone who is versed in the writings of the traditionalists, such as Guénon, Schuon, and Kumaraswamy, how would you compare and contrast the characters and writings of these three figures, and whom do you consider to be the greatest among the three?
Greatest, I don't want to say, but each is the greatest in a certain way.
Yes.
Spiritually, without doubt, Frithjof Schuon. But intellectually and metaphysically and philosophically and so forth, each has a particular salient feature or history of art. But anyway, Ananda Kumaraswamy was a Sri Lankan Hindu, half Hindu, half English, brought up both in England and in early days, was a young man in India, and then came back to the West and became keeper of Oriental art at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, and was a very, very great authority on Oriental art, especially Indian, but also Chinese, Far Eastern, Persian, and so forth. But one of the greatest scholars, really, of the history of art, and he was the person who, influenced by Guénon, turned to tradition to try to explain the inner meaning of traditional art. And because of his very extensive experience and both traveling in India and in the West, and also his readings, many, many languages, was able to present a universal perspective on traditional history of art, philosophy of art, which is extremely important for our day and age. But he also was a metaphysician, and he wrote a few very, very important metaphysical works later on in his life. And also he was a comparativist. His book, The Transformation of Nature and Art, which compares Indian and Western traditional views of art, is really quite remarkable as a comparative work. Guénon, whose Muslim name was Abdul Wahid Yahya, who was not of Hindu background, but he was French Catholic, who embraced Islam later and died in Cairo, spent the last 20 years of his life in Cairo, started as a mathematician. It's interesting that Kumaraswamy also started as a scientist. He became a geologist. He got a PhD in geology before turning to traditional art, because he was doing geological field work in India and discovered all the great Indian art being gradually dilapidated and ruined, and became interested in reviving it. Anyway, Guénon also began as a scientist, he began as a mathematician, but remarkable acumen for metaphysics, for pure metaphysics, and he was able to go from mathematics to metaphysics, and also receive some instructions from Hinduism, and later on embraced Islam, and was able to present a traditional point of view that in a world which was seeking, in which many of the existing, I don't want to say traditional, but existing schools of philosophy were crumbling, especially after the First World War, in a chaotic world of France and of Europe. He was able to establish the traditional perspective, and therefore he plays a very, very important role as, in a sense, the father of the traditional perspective, whose doctrines are not new. They've been since Adam, but whose expression in this way is something that the modern world needed, and which Guénon began to express. As for Frithjof Schuon, like Guénon, he embraced Islam, and he was, in fact, a Sufi master himself. Guénon was never a spiritual teacher. He would send people to Schuon. Sheikh Isa Nuruddin Ahmad was his Muslim name, and he was of Germanic origin, but also wrote mostly in French. His early books, which he wrote for the Second World War, was a very young man when he traveled to North Africa and other places. He wrote, and then at the end of his life, he wrote some poetry in German. The rest of his writings, a very large corpus of books and articles that he wrote, were in French, but he was not a Frenchman like Guénon was. And so, a combination of the Germanic spirit with the French writing was a kind of verticality and horizontality, which these two languages have, into which I will not go now. But Kumaraswamy, and that of his life, was said when the talk he gave at Harvard before he left, he was about to leave to India, and then he died in Needham, Massachusetts, or nearby, near Boston, Massachusetts. He said that I've spent all of my life studying texts, sacred texts, but I didn't practice them. And now I realize that a Moroccan fisherman is closer to God than I am. So I'm going back to India to become a sannyasin and spend the rest of my life in practicing Hinduism. God took his life. He did not do so. He had a remarkable death. He just was sat down on a bench and closed his eyes and died very quickly. And Guénon began with frequenting these occultist circles in France. People who were searching for occultic knowledge, esoteric knowledge here, there, and he also received a lot of negative psychic forces within him until he discovered discovered Islam early in his youth, but it was not practical until he went to Egypt, and he had a sheikh there. He had a Shadili order, and he was a faqir. He was a disciple of the Shadili order, and he lived a full life as a Muslim, but also universalist metaphysically, until he died in 1951 in Cairo. As for Schuon, he also went to Algeria and to receive actually initiation into Sufism. He met the great Sheikh al-Alawi, the great Algerian Sheikh, and became a disciple, and then came back to Europe and went to Algeria on a second trip, 1934, after the death of Sheikh al-Alawi a year before that. And he was given the function of being a Sheikh of the Shadiliya order, that is Alawi, Shadili Alawiya, the Tariqa of Sheikh al-Alawi. He had been representative of Europe, and it was Schuon really who opened up the European scene to the serious presence of Sufism. Now there are many Sufi orders in Europe and America, but before that, Anayat Khan, a few people have migrated from India, but they become very westernized and not really that serious. But Schuon, in a sense, opened up in the whole cosmic ambience of the West room for the presence of Sufism, and it started a tariqah which spread from Europe to America and to a few people in the Orient itself, including myself, who am a Persian. And he was as great a metaphysician as Guénon, but he wrote always also with aspect of spiritual, practical aspect of tradition, not only the doctrinal aspect, but it's after the realization. For example, all the remarkable things written about virtue in both Spiritual Perspective and Human Facts and many other of his writings. And also, Schuon was a remarkable artist, was both a remarkable poet and a very good painter. He painted traditionally the style. He couldn't paint modern painting, of course, against that completely. He wrote against that, and he couldn't just emulate the Persian miniature, but he took from the Persian miniature and Indian art and combined in a sense into a traditional form of painting, which itself is quite significant, which attracted a great deal of attention recently.
And Doctor, you have mentioned that you have also met Frithjof Schuon. One of the few people who has met Frithjof Schuon is you. I was wondering, do you have a particular memory of your encounter with him that you're willing to share about his character or practice, or something that you found interesting?
I have so many.
Yes.
But they're not ready to be shared. But
it's okay if you don't want to share. I just wanted to know, like, about
I
his
will tell you
character.
one story. I will tell you one story about him. He had he was always very serious when looking at people, but he was very shy. That was the reason. When I was very close to him, we were alone, he would sort of might say, open up. And I was writing a book on Islamic science, and George Santayana, a famous Italian scholar, he was the editor of a series on history of science. And I was supposed to meet him. And I met him in Italy. And that led actually to a series of events that not one of the only thing in that book, but a series of events that led to my delivering the Gifford Lectures in 1981, which was the most important lecture of its kind in the world. I was the first Persian, first Muslim to deliver it, so it was a very major event. And I'd taken a plane, gone to the Boston airport to take the plane to go to Edinburgh, where I was going to deliver it. And they said planes are on strike. There's one plane leaving from New York. So I ran with my suitcase to New York. I made that one plane. I arrives in London. They said the fog over London. We have to land in Brussels, and comes over Brussels. The fog there. I miss emergency London. London just, you cannot imagine emergency landing in London. And anyway, I take another plane that had only 92 passengers. Would go to Edinburgh. I got ticket number 92. The very last, it was God had willed it, but it was hectic problems.
Wow.
So I called up the lecture. It was 4 o'clock in Edinburgh in the stately central building of the university. And you know, the British are very formal. The vice chancellor full regalia and chain around the neck, and you can imagine all these deans and so forth and so on. And here I was, my suit all wrinkled because of the airplane, and I couldn't change because my suitcase, I didn't know where it was.
Yes.
So I ran up the stairs to go to this building with big columns in front of it.
Yeah.
And as I ran up, the big clock rang 4 o'clock, and the door opened. And the vice chancellor said, "Oh my God, you're here. We were so worried that you would be late." I said, No, this is Oriental punctuality. When I said that to Frithjof Schuon, he almost fell off his chair. It's a sense of humor also that he had.
Wow.
But I did not reveal that actually to everyone.
Yes.
But he was really quite a remarkable man. May God his soul, bless the soul of all of his three people whom you mentioned.
Yes. Well, Doctor, you're like a Frithjof Schuon yourself. I mean, a living Frithjof Schuon. Doctor, and my other question was that how can one be a metaphysician in the modern world?
Metaphysics is science. Those to whom God has given the intelligence to understand it, it doesn't matter what world they're in, they will understand it. To act is something else. When we were living in 1943 in Germany, obviously living under Nazi rule, there were certain things you could not do. But you could think about God in your room, and you could study metaphysics. So those who are given the gift of understanding metaphysics, serious in the sense that we understand it, not a lot of things are written to about I call metaphysics, not really metaphysics. I mean metaphysics as the traditionalists have developed it. I've just written a little book now, which is a response to Martin Heidegger in a sense. It's called What is Metaphysics?
Wow.
It's coming out very soon. It's a short book. We'll be able to read it in a few hours. I have 3 chapters in it.
Wow. When can we read it, Doctor? When can we buy it, and when is it coming? It's
in press right now, August 5-6 months. The presses have become very slow in this country. Okay. I don't know what's going on with all this modern technology. You can have book on request and so on.
Yes.
I don't know what's going on, but usually, I've published 50 books in Harvard University Press, other press all over the world. Usually it would take about a year. No, it takes about 2 years, but this one is Equinox in London is publishing, and
Okay,
God
okay.
knows, but in the next few months it will come out.
I can't wait to read it, Doctor. And I also heard that you wrote this book on Gulshan Raz, on the
That's right.
secret.
That's also coming out.
Okay, I
It's
hope.
also coming out soon. It's my commentary upon the Gulshan Raz, my
Wow.
translation. First of all, establishment of the Persian text again.
Okay.
Several versions of it. So establishment of the Persian text. It contains the Persian text.
Okay,
Then
wonderful.
my translation of the text into English, and then my commentary.
Wonderful.
It's a big book. It's a
I
big
can't
book.
wait to read it, Doctor. I can't wait to read it. Thank
You
you.
like the Gulshan Raz
I love it, yes. And also Lahiji's commentary.
commentary? Yes, yes.
Yes,
I've
yes,
taught it several times in my lifetime,
yeah.
both in Iran and here.
I wish I was one of your students. I wish I was able to study it with you, as you studied the Hafiz with Hafiz's Divan with Allama Tabatabai.
Yes. Inshallah, maybe one day you'll come here.
Hopefully.
But now
My,
with the modern techniques, I'm talking to you across the world.
what is your advice to people who are in the very beginning of the path, such as myself, and who want to discover the truth, but are living in a modern world, in a world of distraction? What kind of practical advice do you give to these people?
My advice to you is, first of all, remember the verse of the Quran, La taqnatu min rahmatillah. Never lose hope in the mercy of God. If you really ask God, He opens the door to you. Always, sooner or later, if you're earnest, does so. And secondly, not to become disheartened because other people do not accept this point of view or something like that. Many do. Traditional writers are spreading all over the world. I gave one talk in Tehran last year. Over 100,000 people watched it, which is unprecedented. I mean, the old days before this modern gadgets were around, even a big talk about 200, 300, 1,000 people. Once I gave a talk in India, 1,000 people came. This it was unprecedented. But 100,000 people watched it. There is this thirst. There are also people like you, and God's paths are never closed to those who really seek. And let me conclude by the famous saying of Christ, ask and it shall be given unto you. Yes.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you.
Inshallah, you have a good journey back one day from New Zealand, and I don't think I'll visit New Zealand, but my prayers were with you there.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you. Thank you for your generous time.